Hello, everyone. This is Schema Builder Tips and Tricks, and I'm your host, David Zamora. Thank you all for joining the call today. And if you have any questions, just enter them into the chat window, and I'll try to answer them at the end of this session, okay? So let's get started. So first, I'd like to do basically a big shout out to all our friends who attend Salesforce Saturday Austin. As you know, what they say here in Austin, that what starts in Austin often changes the world, and Salesforce Saturday Austin is a prime example of that. It's my understanding that what started here is actually propagated to other places in the world. So thank you all for attending Salesforce Saturday Austin. All right, I'm your host today. My name's David Zamora. There's my Twitter handle and my blog site and some of my certifications on the right that include Platform Developer 1, the Platform App Builder, I'm a certified administrator, and a Service Cloud consultant. Awesome. So quick show of hands, I'm going to send out a survey here. Who's used the Schema Builder and who likes it? Okay, that'll give me a good idea of the audience today. Okay. All right, so we've got about a mixed balance here between people that use it, probably about 50%, and 50% of the people like it. So that's cool. I hope that I'll change your mind after this presentation as we go through it. I'm going to show you some of the advantages to using the Schema Builder, but I will say this, that it's not perfect. When you compare the Schema Builder to the classic, I'll call it the classic UI wizard, for lack of a better term. But what I'm going to do is show you a comparison first so that we have something to build on. And then as we get further and further into this, I think you'll probably decide some of the cool features that are available in the Schema Builder and which ones you might take advantage of. So here's an overview or the agenda for today's session. Basically, I'm going to do an overview of the Schema Builder. And then just so that I could use the UI wizard as a basic comparison, I'm going to go through that and show you how to create an object and add some fields to it. Then again, I'm going to use that as a comparison. Later on, I'm going to show you the UI and the Schema Builder side by side, and you're going to notice some interesting things about some of the capabilities of both. And we'll jump into object data types after that, and there's some really cool stuff that I want to show you about object data types and how they behave within the Schema Builder. Then at the very end, I guess we'll finish off with a demo and then question and answers. Okay? So let's start off with just a brief overview of the Schema Builder. So here it is. It's a dynamic environment in the sense that you can move things around, you can highlight things, you can activate objects by clicking on the left-hand side little check boxes and you can view them. There is and maybe my mouse will probably point to it, there's a selection object up here. Right now it's selected to all objects, but you can actually select the pull down and select standard objects or custom objects or system objects, and I'll show you that in a minute. Some of the cool features, actually you can't see it, but the Elements tab has got basically all the field types listed. And again, I'll show you that as I get into the demo. But what's really cool at a first glance, when I look at an org, the first thing I do is I come in and I look at the Schema Builder, just kind of look at the lay of the land and see how things are related. And I'll look up first, I'll click on the custom objects, gives me an idea of what has been created in the system, and I'll look at the relationships. So what are relationships? Well, if you'll notice closely, the object on the right hand side, campaign, has a little blue line with the three little legged line at the bottom, and that basically tells me that it's a many-to-one relationship, with the many being the three little legs and the line at the end of it up by the top here by campaign. So it's basically related to itself through a many-to-one. What's interesting to note here, also in the middle of the page, is a campaign member object. And you'll notice that there are two relationships coming off this object, and they both have little legs on it, right? So immediately when I see that, I go, aha, that is a many-to-many, so that must be a junction object, and sure enough, it is. You'll notice also that there's little red lines that show you exactly which fields are required, and you'll see at the top there's a little gear that you can select to hide things on the screen, and again, I'll show you that in a second. There's some buttons on the right-hand side, pluses and minuses that you can use to zoom in and zoom out. And down on the right-hand corner, there is a overall zoom that you can zoom into all of your objects just by looking at it. Top left-hand corner, you can actually close the entire schema builder or automatically change the layout. There's some view options up at the top, which I'm going to show you guys as I get further into this presentation, okay? Awesome. Did I forget anything about this? No. Okay. So I'm going to jump in and show you the UI wizard basically, and then let's do a quick demo on that. So here we are. I'm logged in currently. And how do I get to create an object basically? Down here at the bottom, you'll see that there's two options that I use all the time. One is the schema builder and one is to create a new custom object. So let's do that. I'll click on custom object and I'll enter, let's say, my test object, and test object is going to be plural, okay, for test objects. Okay, the name, object name, and I'll put in the description, I'll just put my test object for sake of a better description. Go through this. It's got a lot of checkboxes. The name, my test object, I'll change that to auto number. Display, I'll put S dash curly brackets 1 2 3 4 1. Close that out. It'll start with 1. And there's some more things down here that I could select. I'll select these things. And you notice that my allow share, allow bulk API access, and these are all basically selected. I'm going to say it's in development, and I want to allow searches, and I want to add notes and attachments to this relevant default page layout. I don't want to launch the tab wizard at this point in time. So pretty easy, huh? Created it. We'll click on save. And there's an error message because I'll copy that out. Okay, cool. Auto number A and save. Awesome. There we go. Okay, now next thing we're going to do, let's create one field. What I want you guys to notice is that I actually like the way this page is laid out. Because as a beginner, if you're trying to create a checkbox, it kind of gives you an explanation of what you're doing and what is the function of a checkbox. And the same thing goes for example, number, and allows you to enter a number with leading zeros removed. Hey, cool. You know what? That's awesome, right? If you're a beginner, that might give you some insight into which data type to select, right? Text or text area. Let's look at text area. It says that it allows users to enter up to 255 characters on a separate line. Okay, cool. The reason I'm pointing this out is because once we jump into the schema builder, we're going to lose some of the capabilities that we're staring at right now. So there's a trade-off. All right, let's go. Let's create a field. It's a text field. We'll call it my text. The length of the field, I'll call it 200. And a description, I'll enter a description here. My text field. And I can choose whether it's required or unique or an external ID. This is kind of interesting because later on we're going to talk about this. Whether you make it required, unique, or an external ID, or it has a default value. So, okay, well, let's see. I'll make it external. I'll make it unique. And the default value will be, I don't know, double quotes, buckle up. And I know it's double quotes because it tells me right here. Okay, great. Let's click on next. Whether I want to make it visible to the users. You know, I can't change it. Well, darn. That's no fair. Okay, click next. And save. Whew, that was a lot of work just to create an object and create a field, but along the way we learned a couple of things. One, that there is an explanation on the page that tells us exactly what's going to occur when we select a certain data type. In this case, we selected a text field. And we're going to see the differences between this and the schema builder in just a second. So cool. All right, enough of this. Let's get back to the presentation. All right, so this is basically, I'm laying out the UI that we just saw to create an object. Or actually, this is, yeah, exactly, this is an object. And on the right-hand side is the schema builder. And this is what the object looks like when I'm creating an object in the schema builder. And at first glance, you go, wait a second, Dave. There seems like a lot more fields on the left-hand side as opposed to the right. Creating an object using the schema builder looks really cool because it's kind of streamlined. Well, yes and no. There are some fields missing, and I'm going to highlight those in just a second. So on the left-hand side are the parameters that you need to enter. For example, a label. If you're going to create a label both in the schema builder and in the UI wizard, there is a place for a label. And I won't go through all of these, but I want to highlight the areas in pink. So as we just saw just a second ago, you can allow in shader groups, and there was a little checkbox in the classic wizard, allow sharing and allow bulk API access, and that was there. Also streaming, by the way. Those were there, and those were already checked for us. But when you come over to the schema builder, you go, hey, wait a second, Dave. It's in pink, by the way. Those fields don't exist in the schema builder. You're like, what? Yep, they don't exist. So the same token, in the classic wizard that we just saw, there's no checkbox or anything that says available for customer portal. That's only available if you're creating the object through the schema builder. And they both share the in development / deployment option, but the schema builder actually has something called add Google Doc notes and attachments to related default layout. Cool, but in the classic UI, it's not there. And you're like, hey, what gives, right? So you see my point is that there's some similarities and then there are differences. So the reason I'm showing you this is so that you become aware of these differences, and if you're using the UI versus the schema builder. Okay. All right, now let's talk about the data types that we just saw. Date, time, checkbox, so on for text fields, text areas. Let's go over them real quick. The reason is we're going to start to build a case on just basically looking at the different data types. We've already seen the objects and the differences between the objects. But let's take a look at the data types now. Okay, here's an eye chart. Thank you very much. What I want to highlight are the data types on the left-hand side. And I've got those listed: checkbox, date and time, phone, pick list, so on and so forth. And across the top, I've got the parameter values that we're entering. For example, label and name and description and default value, so on and so forth. Those are all up on the top. So as you read this chart from top to bottom, for example, field label, and you read it from top to bottom, I got little O's there that say those are available for all those data types. So it just makes sense that you have a label, you have a name, and you have a description for almost all of the data types. And you've got default values, whether or not there is a default value, whether it's required or not, whether it has a length, so on and so forth. All right, enough of this eye chart. What I'd like to point out is the two boxes right in the center, and they're yellow. So interestingly enough, as I was putting this presentation together, I couldn't find, when I created a pick list using the schema builder, the required field isn't there. And that goes for both the pick list and the multi-select pick list. The required field was not there. And I'm thinking to myself, really? Well, it's available in the UI wizard, but what happened? Did they forget it? So it's not there. I don't know who forgot it, but it's not there. So I want to point this fact out. So if you're using the schema builder and you're building a pick list, you might notice that this field is not there. One other thing that you'll notice is that if you go through and if you can look at this up in the documentation, they'll say that the geolocation isn't available in the smart list builder, and that's actually a known fact. However, I could not find anything in the literature that said why the external lookup relationship wasn't in the schema builder as well. So there's two fields that I can't create using schema builder, and those are the geolocation and the external lookup. Like, wow. Okay, well, that's good to know, right? All right, so what I've done is taken that chart and basically done a pivot on it. So now I'm looking at the field label, name, description, and all these things running down the side on the left-hand side, and the data types are across the top. What I want to highlight is default value. And when should I use a default value? Well, maybe just whenever you want to, right? Cool, you can do that. But I'm trying to figure out the rule behind when you should use a default value. And I'm going to show you the only thing that I could come up with that makes sense, that will basically guide you towards whether you should use a default value or not. And here it is. Whenever you create a new record, Salesforce, let's say for example, I've got 1, 2, 3 fields that have default values. Salesforce doesn't keep the default values stored within the record. It has to go out to something called the data dictionary. Now, I don't know exactly what Salesforce calls it, but let's just think of it as a dictionary that it has to look up the default value and bring it back the minute it's trying to create the new record. So the more fields you have populated on your object, the more trips it has to make to go get the default value that's stored somewhere. Does that make sense? So in this picture here, when we're creating a new record, it's going to make 3 trips out to find what the default value for these fields are. Now, if I'm a user and I'm creating a new record using the user interface, I click on the new button, the form pops up, I look at it. Chances are I won't tell or the difference between the Salesforce going out and looking at a data dictionary and bringing it back. Probably won't tell the difference as far as time is concerned. But imagine if I'm inserting 50,000 new records and I do this, every week or something. Now, chances are I would notice the difference between doing that, inserting new records and being a mass insert as opposed to just creating it through the UI. There might be some slowdown. But then again, I've been searching through the literature and trying to determine when is a good time to use a default value, and I can't come up with one. But the only thing that I can imagine that it would affect, like I said, is probably when you're mass inserting records. You probably don't want default values. And it makes sense, so you probably bring in the values in anyway, right? So, okay, cool. All right, the next thing on my list is length. So how do you specify length for certain data types? And if you look across the way here for lengths, you'll see that currency, percentage, numbers start off with a default of 18, and I'm going to show you that in an example here second. Text, although it doesn't tell you that a text field, the maximum allowable is 255, and interestingly enough, for an encrypted text field, it's 175. Honestly, I didn't know that until I tested it just a while ago. It's like, wow, 175, why? But it is 175. And then, of course, the evil long text area and the evil rich text area. These are pretty big data types. Now look at this, 32,000 characters each. And if you put this on a form and let people enter data into this, you'll see people pasting emails and all kinds of crazy stuff that really slows down performance. So try to size them appropriately and perhaps maybe avoid using long text areas and maybe force users to do attachments or something. But I've seen over time how people kind of abuse those long text area and rich text area data types. Okay? So let's see. Let's look at an example. Actually, I've got two on the screen. So on the top left, I've got a text field. And you'll notice that the text field, for one, some of the definitions that we saw in the UI wizard on how to use a text field aren't in the schema builder. And the same thing goes for the field on the right-hand side. It's a currency field. There's no description. So we lost that ability. Now, if you're new to Salesforce and creating objects and you need that information, perhaps the UI wizard is perhaps better for you because it does have those explanations. But in the schema builder, they're not there. So let's take a look at this text field. Although the length of the text field isn't specified, I know it's 255 because I showed that to you on the chart before. And let's suppose that I am creating a field called zip code. Well, I'm going to actually size this appropriately. And I'm going to actually enter the length as 18. And because I haven't really seen any zip codes go beyond 18. So I know that I'm going to put 18 characters worth of information as the length for this field. And if in the future I need to expand it, I will. But you're going to have to give me a good reason for that to happen. And let's assume for just a second that I kept it at 255 because I didn't know what was going to go into the zip code. Then people will populate it with just about everything and anything. So size your fields appropriately. In this case, the length is 18. On the right-hand side is it's just a picture of a currency field I was creating. But the default value is 18. I really don't need 18 characters, or this is digits to the left of the decimal point. Here's an example. I'm creating a currency field called monthly mortgage. I'm going to specify the length of 6 and the decimal place of 2. So I'm going to size this field appropriately. Now, I've seen in some organizations that people just leave the length of default because they really don't know. So you can specify exactly how many places to the left and how many places to the right of the decimal. So size them accordingly, okay? Next is external ID. Ah, my friend. External ID is so cool. And so if you look on this chart, external IDs can be used for numbers, text, and emails. And you can specify whether they're unique or not. Okay, cool, right? But here's the cool thing about external IDs. is loading data. They can be used when you're loading data from an external system. Here's an example. I am inserting records from an Oracle system, and let's say there's sales orders, and each sales order has a unique number in Oracle. And let's say the number starts with O, 1, 2, 3, 4, something. That is unique to the Oracle system. So when I bring that in and I load that data in from Oracle, I'll make that an external ID and make it unique. Okay? There's a couple of things that happen when I do that. Is that it makes that field searchable, and also it helps out with data integrations. The best use case that I can think of is when you do an update or an upsert, right? So you can use that external ID, pop it in there, and off you go. It makes life a lot easier. I think making the field searchable is actually pretty cool too. Another benefit is that external IDs become indexed. So what does that do for you? Well, think of an index as an index in the back of a book. And that serves a purpose where you're looking for something, let's say a topic or a subject or something in the index. You open it up to the back, you find the index, and it tells you exactly what page to go to find what you're looking for. And it might have various pages, but it actually tells you where it's at and how to quickly get to what you're looking for. Well, the same thing happens in a database. If we have 1 million records in our system in one object, if you will, and we're looking for something, and Salesforce on the back end says, hey, I'm looking for a certain variable or field, and it's indexed, it'll quickly look up the index, sort of like a book, and then quickly go through and find it within the 1 million records or rows, and then bring those results back to you. It's just a quicker way, instead of having to go through 1 million records just to find what you're looking for. It just quickly looks it up through an index. Cool. External IDs are your friend. Use them every time you can, because they offer a lot of opportunity, basically. Okay, so now this is the highlight. Let's go and open up the schema builder. Okay, so how do I get to the schema builder? And from the setup, you'll notice that schema builder is right in the middle, right above creating a new custom object. So I'll click on schema builder. A couple of things. Now, we noticed earlier that we couldn't see the elements tab when I was showing you the screen, but the elements tab, I can do a couple of things. One, create an object, create some fields. I can do some lookups, some hierarchies, or master details, and then I've got all these fields here. Again, I'll point out that from the previous slides we saw that geolocation isn't available, or an external lookup relationship isn't available. So you're like, okay, cool. All right, we're going to grab an object. Well, before we do, let's explore. Let's click on the Objects tab, and up here, I'm going to click on Standard Objects, and I'll select my account. Well, let's just select them all. Off we go, and there's a whole mess of stuff. So I'll click on Auto Layout. Let's see what happens. Well, it tries to do an auto layout, but what you can do is on the bottom right-hand corner, you can use this little viewfinder to move around. And you go, holy cow, my head's about to explode. Well, mine is too. So I'm going to clear everything, and I just want to see accounts, contact, and maybe opportunities. Do an auto layout, and here you have it. Here's my account, contact, and I'm going to scroll down, get my opportunity object, and bring that up. Kind of lay these out side by side. Sweet. Now you're starting to notice that there is a lookup relationship. I'm just going to hover over it. Maybe I'll put this on this side so you can see better. Okay, cool. The red line signifies a hierarchy. That is a one a self-to-self relationship, as they call it. So this is basically relating itself back to itself. Well, little red line. And you'll see that over on the right-hand side is a master detail relationship, but it's kind of relating itself back to itself. The little lines on the left signifies that this is a many to one relationship. So there's many records on the left-hand side in contact for every one record account. And the same thing goes for opportunities. There's many opportunity records for one account record. And I can hover over it and it kind of tells me what the relationship is. Okay? In the middle of the page, I mentioned earlier, you see little red lines, and those are required fields. At the top, I can do things like view the object and view the page layouts. And let's actually click on the view object, see what happens. Oh, cool, it took us to the account object. All right, well, I don't want that. I can hide the object on the canvas and do a couple of things. Okay, cool. I can quickly, by scrolling down, I could see whether these fields are standard fields or custom fields. And I'm looking for an _ C, and I don't see any. Okay. I actually want to bring up a custom field for you because I'm going to show you something. So let's go look for a custom object, this guy here. I know there's some custom objects, maybe not. All right, moving on. The field, I can double click on a field and it brings it up. Notice the length, and I can make modifications to this field if I want to. And double click, comes up. I can make some modifications here as well. I'm going to right click on it. This is really cool. I could manage field permissions. So what is that? Watch this. Aha! Now I can specify if it's visible or read only. And this is huge. I love this feature because I can quickly go through these custom fields, click on it, manage field permissions, set the field permissions, and move on. I think that only works for custom fields. And I can also delete the field or edit the field property. So let's do that. Come in here and I can edit the field property, change it to required, unique if I want to, so on and so forth, okay? So this, just by double clicking, is very powerful. One thing I did point out earlier is that a pick list does not have a required checkbox. And you're like, hey, wait a second, Dave. Well, yeah, it doesn't. I actually told you that in one of the previous slides, that you cannot specify whether this is a required field or not. So how do you deal with that? Well, you're going to have to go back to the actual object and specify whether a field is required or not. Okay? You can't do it in the schema builder. Sorry, folks. It's too bad. Okay? So where are we? Now, basically, I've shown you there's some options up here to display element names. You can hide relationships. Let's do that, but by relationships. But I don't know why you would do that, because relationships are cool. And you can also hide the legend. What's the legend? The thing over on the right-hand side. Watch it disappear. Okay, cool. I want it back. And like I said, I'm going to just clear all. Standard objects. I'll clear all my standard objects. Okay, cool. And this is basically how you navigate through the schema builder. Okay, so let's continue here. I'm going to move this off the page. And what I'd like to do is kind of show you how I use the schema builder and kind of the reasons why I was showing you some of these data types, because I kind of work through some of the data types ahead of time in my workbook before I create an object. Okay, so let's do that. am going to drag this guy and this guy. So I'm going to lay these out side by side. And what you'll see in my Excel spreadsheet here is an object. And I've got my object down at the bottom. And then I've laid out all the fields that I'm going to be using to create this. And then once I'm done with it, I'm going to create a list of fields. I'm going to expand this out for just a second so you can see what's going on here. This, my friends, is one of the snapshots I had on a slide, and it basically shows me some of the field types and some of the required fields, whether or not it's a checkbox, for example, whether it's required, the length and stuff like that. So it kind of gives me an idea ahead of time. I use this as a legend, and I'm going to be creating all these data types. And here's the field names, the field labels, field names, descriptions, the default values, so on and so forth. So why am I going through all this trouble? Well, I like to do this ahead of time. This is before I create the object. I'll lay out all my fields, and then it makes it easier when I create the object and I create the data types that I already have them. I've thought through these, and that's less prone to error. And then once I'm done with the object, I'm going to go back and show you this really cool Chrome add-in that you could use to document everything that you've done in your objects. And so you'll use that as a basic reference every time, as basic reference documentation. How about that? So every time you need to look at the objects contained or the data types contained within your object, just pull up your Excel spreadsheet, and that's your record of all the field types. And this tool will do it for you. So this is kind of prepping you so that if you start learning how to do this in advance, creating objects will be a breeze. Okay? So how are we going to do this? Let's move this out of the page, or off the page here. So we're going to create a new object, and it's going to be called my object. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag the object to the screen, and I'm just going to do a copy and paste my objects. Cool. It's a constant. The object's my object. The description I already have over here, and I'll call the record name, and the record name's auto. It's an auto number. I'll paste that in. Hopefully it won't get upset. Put 1, and I'm not going to select any of the. Well, sure, why not? Let's select this. Available in the customer portal. Not really. I'll say it's in development, and I'll save. Awesome. So we have our object. Next, let's go and create a text field. I'm looking at my spreadsheet over here, and it says, hey, I'm going to create a text field called stage name. So copy my stage name, grab my text field, drop it on the object, paste that in there. And since I don't like underscores, bye-bye underscore. And the description, and I like to put descriptions in everything. Whether it's required, the length is 20, and there is no default value. I'm going to make this unique. Yep, and I'll treat ABC as ABC and make it an external ID. Click on save. Voila. Next, location. It's going to be a pick list. So I'll grab a pick list, drop it on the screen, call it location, location. I have a description. Descriptions are important, and don't forget that the description is not for your benefit. The description is for someone else's benefit as they come back and look and see, for example, why a certain field was created. Type in as much as you can into that description. Make it as descriptive as you can be, basically. So the values, let's say it's required. I can't make it required, sorry. But the pick list, and then I have some values over here that I'll paste in. Call it north, south, east, and west. Click on save. There's my pick list. Scroll over to the right. The next thing I'm going to do is create a number called size. Grab my number, size, my description. And it's required, yes. The default value is nothing. And the length is 4. Decimal place is 0. And I'm going to make this required. Okay. Save. Next. I'm going to create a date field. Drag and drop. Okay, this is getting boring, right? No underscores. And there is no default value and it's not required. I'll click on save. I'm going to drag a phone. I'm picking it up, folks. Take the underscore because I hate underscores. I'll paste the description in there. And it's not required. I'll click on save. Now I need a checkbox. Grab a checkbox, drag it onto the field. Is active. Take the underscore out because I hate underscores. I'll grab the description. You see where I'm going with this. And for a checkbox, the default value is actually required, but the funny thing is that it's going to be one of these. So is it really required? Not really. You just have to specify the default value. So I'm going to say unchecked, which is kind of cool. Is active. Yep. Click on save. And that's it. I've got my object. When you're creating an object, let's look at the page layout now. Okay? Because we're not done. Come over to the page layout and I'll click on edit page layout. You're going to notice something. Look at my fields. Hey, wait a second. They're not on the page. So I'll grab these, drag them onto the page, and drop them on the page. Now the difference between using the Smart List Builder and using the UI Wizard is that the UI Wizard will actually insert the fields that you're creating onto the page, whereas the Smart List Builder doesn't. So there's an extra step involved in going in and dragging the fields onto your layout. I'll click on save. And there you have it. Close it out. Now I have an object. I can right click and view it in the window. I can manage the field permissions now. Click on this and say, hey, I don't want it visible to anybody but my system administrators. Whoa, yeah, cool. All right. That's it, folks. That's essentially how you create an object using Schema Builder, and kind of how I do it by using the little legend. Okay. Now let's go back to the main page, and I'll go to accounts and open up just an account, any account. Cool. I'm going to use this tool up here called the Salesforce Dev Tool. Click on it, and it's going to look at this object. I'll click on export. It actually dropped an Excel spreadsheet down at the bottom, and I'm going to open that up when it finishes. Say yes. Awesome. Here you go. So it basically took my object, all the API, the field labels, the data types, the lengths, whether it's required or not, the pick list values that are in it, and basically outline this. And I use this to document my objects. As I create them, I use the Chrome add-in, and it's called Salesforce Dev Tool. This is a really cool tool. You can use it for a lot of different things, but I can also say, hey, show me the API names. And notice that the API names show up on the screen. So it's a versatile tool that you can use. This is not a part of the Schema Builder per se, but I use it at the tail end of the use of Schema Builder and how I build these objects out. So I hope that this presentation was helpful, that you learned something. And as always, if you have any questions, just reach out to me. You've got my Twitter handle or my blog site. Okay, I don't see any questions, so I guess I'll end this call. Thank you all very much. Bye-bye.